The refugee crisis in Arunachal Pradesh is a direct threat to the identity, land and rights of its indigenous tribes. The arrival and settlement of over 65,000 Chakma and Hajong refugees, originally displaced from Bangladesh in the 1960s, has sparked deep concerns among the region's indigenous communities. To understand the roots of this crisis, let's look at a detailed timeline. In 1964, following the construction of the Apatani Dam, in the Chittagong Hill tracts of then East Pakistan, now Bangladesh, and religious persecution, approximately 100,000 people, including Chakmas, mostly Buddhists, and Hajongs, mostly Hindus, were displaced. Between 1964 and 1969, the Indian government resettled around 14,888 Chakmas and 2,748 Hajongs in the Northeast Frontier Agency, now Arunachal Pradesh. Over the decades, their numbers grew due to natural increase and further migration, reaching over 65,000 by the 2011 census, and estimated at over 70,000 by 2024. The question of their citizenship and rights became increasingly contentious as the decades passed. In 1994, the All Arunachal Pradesh Students' Union, AAPSU, launched a major agitation demanding the deportation of Chakma and Hajong refugees. In 1996, the Supreme Court of India ruled against the forced eviction of these refugees, further complicating the situation. In 2004, the Supreme Court directed the government to process citizenship applications of Chakma and Hajong refugees, but implementation lagged. In 2015, the Ministry of Home Affairs issued guidelines for granting citizenship to eligible Chakma and Hajong refugees, but the Arunachal Pradesh government opposed the move. In 2017, the central government announced plans to grant citizenship to minorities from neighboring countries through the Citizenship Amendment Act, CAA, including Chakmas and Hajongs, sparking widespread protests in Arunachal and other parts of northeast India. In 2021, the National Human Rights Commission called for the protection of Chakma and Hajong rights. As of 2024, the issue remains unresolved, with both indigenous and refugee communities voicing their demands and the debate intensifying. The indigenous tribes are fighting to protect their ancestral lands and cultural identity. They argue that the rapid demographic change caused by the Chakma-Hajong settlements puts immense pressure on limited resources and risks eroding their unique way of life. Nanibat, a leading indigenous rights advocate, sums up the fear: "Our land is our identity. If we lose our land, we lose our culture, our language, our future. The influx of refugees threatens everything we stand for." The core of the indigenous struggle is about land rights and legal protections. Arunachal Pradesh is governed by special laws like the Bengal Eastern Frontier Regulation, 1873, and the Arunachal Pradesh Scheduled Tribes Act. These laws restrict land ownership and entry to safeguard indigenous interests. The Interline Permit, ILP system, enforced under these laws, is a key demand of indigenous organizations, such as the All Arunachal Pradesh Students' Union, AAPSU, Nyishi Elite Society, NES, Adiban Kabang, ABK, and the Indigenous Faith and Cultural Society of Arunachal Pradesh, IFCSAP, who insist on its strict implementation to protect their rights. Notably, in 1980, the Arunachal Pradesh government passed a resolution opposing the permanent settlement of Chakma and Hajong refugees, and in 1992, the State Assembly reiterated its stand against granting them citizenship. On the other side, the Chakma and Hajong refugees, represented by organizations like the Chakma Development Foundation of India, CDFI, and the Committee for Citizenship Rights of the Chakmas of Arunachal Pradesh, CCRCP, demand Indian citizenship, access to education, healthcare, and the right to own property. They argue that decades of statelessness have left them vulnerable and marginalized, and that the Supreme Court's 1996 judgment and the Citizenship Act, 1955, support their claims. In 2015, the Chakma and Hajong communities submitted thousands of citizenship applications, but most remain pending as of 2024. Indigenous leaders see the Supreme Court's 1996 ruling against forced eviction of refugees as undermining these protections. The state government's reluctance to grant citizenship to Chakma-Hajong refugees is rooted in the need to preserve the constitutional and customary rights of the indigenous people. In 2017, the Arunachal Pradesh government formally opposed the central government's proposal to grant citizenship, citing demographic and cultural concerns. For the tribes, this is not just a legal issue, it is about survival. Their customary laws form the foundation of their society, As Nani Bhatt explains, if outsiders are given equal rights to land and resources, our entire system will collapse. The fear is real. In Tripura, unchecked migration led to indigenous people becoming a minority in their own land. Arunachal's tribes worry that history could repeat itself, resulting in the loss of their identity and autonomy. In 2022, the Arunachal Pradesh government cited the example of Tripura in its official communications to the central government, warning of similar consequences. In the midst of this debate, some have proposed a possible solution: granting Indian citizenship to the Chakma and Hajong refugees, but with the condition that they are resettled outside Arunachal Pradesh. This approach aims to address the humanitarian needs of the refugees while also protecting the land and identity of Arunachal's indigenous tribes. Supporters of this option argue that it could offer a balanced path forward, ensuring the refugees are no longer stateless, yet preserving the demographic and cultural integrity of the state. However, this proposal also faces challenges, including the logistics of resettlement and the willingness of other states to accept the refugees. In 2023, the central government discussed the possibility of resettlement with several northeastern states, but no consensus was reached. International conventions such as the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, UNDRIP, adopted in 2007, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, ICCPR, ratified by India in 1979, and the International Labour Organization Convention 169, affirmed the right of indigenous communities to self-determination and control over their lands and resources. India, as a signatory to several of these conventions, is obligated to uphold these rights, even as it balances humanitarian concerns for refugees. In 2021, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Minority Issues called on India to ensure the protection of both indigenous and refugee rights in Arunachal Pradesh. The indigenous people of Arunachal Pradesh demand that the government strictly enforce the inner line permit system and recognize their unique vulnerabilities. They point to the lessons of Tripura and Assam, where demographic changes led to social unrest and loss of indigenous rights. Meanwhile, Chakma Hajong organizations continue to petition for citizenship and equal rights, citing humanitarian grounds and constitutional guarantees. In 2024, the AAPSU and IFCSAP renewed their calls for the protection of indigenous rights, while the CDFI launched a nationwide campaign for Chakma Hajong citizenship. Dialogue is important, but any resettlement or citizenship plan must prioritize the protection of indigenous land, culture, and autonomy. As Nani Bhatt argues, integration cannot come at the cost of erasing our identity. Arunachal Pradesh is not just a territory, it is a living heritage of tribes, languages, and traditions. The indigenous community's fears are grounded in law, history, and lived experience. The future of Arunachal's indigenous people depends on the choices made today. Protecting their land and identity is essential to preserving the soul of Arunachal Pradesh. What do you think? Should the rights of Arunachal's indigenous people be prioritized to protect their culture and lands? Or is there a way to balance compassion for refugees with the preservation of indigenous identity? Should citizenship be granted to refugees only if they are resettled outside the state? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters in this crucial conversation. Remember to subscribe, like, and share this video to raise awareness about the struggles of Arunachal's indigenous tribes. Together, let's work toward a future that honors their legacy and secures their rights.